Most people would rather have something than nothing. The INFJ would rather have nothing than something that is not real, and that preference has cost them more than most people will ever understand. There is a choice the INFJ makes repeatedly that the people around them never understand. It looks like self-imposed isolation, like unnecessarily high standards, like someone rejecting connection that is right in front of them because it is not perfect enough. And from the outside, what is being rejected looks like enough. It looks like relationship. It looks like exactly what the INFJ claims to need. But the INFJ says no anyway, quietly, without drama. Not this. Not if this is what this is. Here is what people miss when they watch that choice happen. The INFJ is not being a perfectionist. They are not holding out for an idealized connection that does not exist. They are making a specific, grounded assessment, one their nervous system makes before their analytical mind even engages, about whether what is being offered is real or whether it is something that has the shape of connection without the substance of it. And when the answer is simulation, choosing nothing is not deprivation. It is the only honest option available, because artificial connection does not just fail to satisfy the INFJ. It costs them more than its absence would have. If this channel keeps giving language to things you have lived without being able to explain, subscribe. This is exactly what we do here. Let's get into it. The INFJ can feel the difference between real and simulated and connection in their body. Most people assess connection intellectually. They ask questions like, does this person show up consistently? Do we have things in common? Do I enjoy their company? Do they treat me well? These are legitimate questions, and the answers to them provide real information about the quality of a relationship. But they are processed analytically through a framework of evaluation that sits above the immediate felt experience of being with the person. The INFJ's primary assessment of connection does not happen at this analytical level. It happens at the level of the body, before the analytical mind has assembled the questions. When the INFJ is with someone in genuine connection, real mutual, depth-level contact, their nervous system produces a specific felt quality that is not reducible to any single describable sensation, but that the INFJ recognizes immediately and completely. A quality of settling, of arriving somewhere, of the interior, which is usually running in a kind of mild background vigilance, going quiet in a way that only happens when the environment is genuinely safe and genuine exchange is actually occurring. When the connection is simulated, when the person across from them is performing interest rather than actually present, when the warmth is managed rather than felt, when the conversation has the structure of depth without the actual willingness to go there, the INFJ's body produces a different signal. Not a negative signal exactly, not discomfort in an obvious way, but an absence of the settling, a quality of the interior remaining alert, a sense below articulation, of reaching towards something that keeps not quite being there, of the hand extended and the meeting point not arriving. The INFJ cannot always name this signal immediately. They cannot always translate it into a assessment in the early stages of a connection, but it is always running. And over time, with enough accumulated experience of what real feels like versus what simulated feels like, the signal becomes precise enough that the INFJ trusts it before the analytical evidence has fully assembled. They know, not because they decided to know, because the body told them. And a body that has been trained by years of high sensitivity processing of human interaction is a more accurate instrument for this specific measurement than any intellectual framework the INFJ could construct. This is why the INFJ's rejection of artificial connection can look impulsive or harsh from the outside. It is not impulsive. It is based on information that arrived faster than the visible evidence. Information the INFJ's system collected and processed before any of it could be articulated. The conclusion comes before the explanation, and the conclusion is usually accurate. Artificial connection does not just fail to nourish, it actively depletes. There is a common assumption about connection and loneliness that seems intuitive but breaks down completely when applied to the INFJ experience. The assumption is that any connection is better than no connection. That social interaction, even imperfect social interaction, provides some baseline of human contact that is preferable to its absence. That the loneliness of being alone is always more costly than the imperfection of being with someone in a less than ideal way. For the average person, this assumption holds reasonably well. Surface connection, small talk, the ambient social texture of being around people even without depth. These things do provide something. They take the edge off the human need for belonging in a way that complete isolation does not. The cost of imperfect connection is generally lower than the cost of no connection at all. For the Infj, this calculation is reversed, and not slightly reversed, fundamentally, structurally reversed in a way that the Infj has usually figured out through repeated and painful experience before they have the language to explain it. Artificial connection does not just fail to satisfy the Infj, it costs them more than its absence would have. The reason is mechanical and specific. The Infj's processing system does not have a surface gear. When they are with someone, they are running the full absorption process, tracking the subtext, feeling the emotional undercurrent, processing what is real versus what is performed, noticing the gap between what the interaction is presenting and what is actually there. All of that processing happens at full cost, whether the interaction has depth or not. Whether something real is being exchanged or not, the cost is fixed. The return varies. In genuine connection, the return offsets the cost. Something real is exchanged, the interior is reached. The Infj leaves the interaction having spent significant energy and having received something that genuinely feeds them. The transaction, in terms of depletion versus nourishment, works. In artificial connection, the cost is identical. The Infj's system ran the full processing load. They absorbed, they tracked, they felt the performance alongside the absence, of what the performance was covering. But nothing was returned that reached the place where they needed to be reached. The transaction is entirely negative. They spent everything. They received nothing that offsets the expenditure. This means the Infj who spends significant time in artificial connections, out of loneliness, out of social obligation, out of the culturally endorsed belief that any connection is better than none, is not maintaining a minimum baseline of social nourishment. They are running a deficit. They are becoming less resourced, not more, through the very activity that was supposed to serve the need. And understanding this is the beginning of understanding why the Infj's preference for nothing over something fake is not a character flaw. It is a metabolic reality. The specific types of artificial connection the Infj encounters most. Artificial connection is not a single thing. It arrives in specific forms, some more obvious than others, some designed by the people involved, and some produced by systems and structures that neither person chose. Understanding the specific forms helps the Infj recognize them more quickly and stop investing energy in directions that will not produce what they need. The most immediately recognizable form is performed intimacy. The person who asks deep questions but uses the answers as content rather than as genuine information about someone they want to know. The person who shares vulnerability strategically, not because they are actually opening something, but because they have learned that performed vulnerability produces closeness that they can benefit from. This form is the most straightforward for the Infj to eventually identify, because the inauthenticity has a texture that their detection system reliably catches. The performed version feels like a construction. Real vulnerability feels like an arrival. Less immediately recognizable is structural shallowness. This is not about the other person's intentions. It is about the design of the environment. Many modern social contexts are structured in ways that systematically prevent depth from developing, even when both people involved genuinely want it. The professional relationship that operates on managed presentation. The social group, organized around activity, rather than genuine mutual interest in each other's interior. The friendship that has warm history, but has never been given the specific kind of time and undivided attention that depth requires to develop. These connections are not fake in the sense of being dishonest. but they are structurally limited in ways that prevent them from ever becoming what the INFJ needs. The warmth is real, the shallowness is also real, and the INFJ, who mistakes structural shallowness for temporary shallowness that will deepen with more time invested, will invest a great deal of time in relationships that cannot structurally support what they are looking for. The third form is digital simulation, the connection that exists primarily or entirely through screens, through messaging, through social media interaction, through the accumulated exchange of content rather than actual presence. Digital communication can support real connection that was established in person, but it cannot create the felt quality of genuine human contact from scratch. The INFJ, who is primarily fed by digital social interaction, is primarily fed by the representation of connection rather than the experience of it. And the representation, however sophisticated, does not produce the settling, the body signal of actual arrival that only real presence can create. Why INFJs sometimes choose artificial connection anyway, and what it costs them. The INFJ's preference for nothing over something fake does not mean they always act on that preference. The same person who can articulate clearly that artificial connection depletes rather than nourishes, who knows from direct experience what the difference between real and simulated feels like in their body, who has made the choice many times to disengage from something hollow rather than continue engaging out of social obligation. That same person also, regularly, finds themselves in artificial connections they chose to enter and are staying in past the point where their assessment has made the conclusion obvious. This is not hypocrisy. It is the specific tension between the INFJ's genuine need for real connection and the genuine scarcity of real connection in the available social environment. The INFJ who holds out only for depth will spend significant periods genuinely alone, not contentedly alone. Alone in the way that presses on the human need for belonging in a way that is not sustainable indefinitely. And at a certain point, the loneliness of nothing becomes acute enough that the INFJ moves towards something. Even something they can already assess is not the real thing, because the body's need for some form of human contact overrides the interior's assessment of the quality of what is available. This is one of the most painful and least talked about aspects of the INFJ experience. The INFJ who enters an artificial connection knowingly, who goes in with the full awareness that this is not real, but the genuine human need for some form of contact making the case for going anyway, pays a specific compound cost. They pay the depletion cost of engaging with something that takes without returning. They pay the hope cost, the part of them that enters any connection hoping this might be different than assessed, and is confirmed in the assessment rather than pleasantly surprised. And they pay what might be called the integrity cost, the specific internal friction of acting against their own clearest knowledge of what is real and what is not. Understanding that this choice comes from genuine human need rather than weakness or poor judgment is important. The INFJ is not failing when they choose imperfect connection over isolation. They are human. They are balancing a real tension between two real costs. The work is not eliminating the tension. It is developing enough internal resource, enough genuine relationship with their own interior, enough capacity to inhabit solitude without it becoming desperation, that the balance point shifts, that the threshold for entering artificial connection rises, that the nothing of genuine solitude becomes genuinely preferable to the something of simulation more consistently than it currently is. The INFJ's relationship with solitude as the alternative to artificial connection. The reason the INFJ can choose nothing over something fake, the reason this preference is a genuine option rather than a theoretical position that collapses under pressure, is that the INFJ has access, more than most people, to a quality of solitude that is not simply the absence of others, but is itself a form of nourishment. This is not universal among INFJs, it develops, it is not automatic, but it is one of the most significant resources available to the INFJ who has built it, and it is what makes the choice for nothing over fake something that can actually be sustained. Most people's experience of solitude is primarily the experience of absence. Being alone is defined by what is not there: the conversation, the company, the social contact, the external input that makes the time feel meaningful. Solitude as absence is survivable for limited periods, but it is not nourishing. It is the thing you endure until the real thing becomes available again. The INFJ who has developed a genuine relationship with their own interior, who has, through the specific kind of reflective inner work that comes naturally to this type when it is pointed at themselves rather than perpetually outward, has access to something categorically different: solitude as presence, solitude as contact with an interior world that is rich enough, complex enough, genuinely interesting enough to inhabit rather than just endure. The INFJ whose inner world is this kind of place does not experience being alone as waiting. They experience it as being somewhere specific, somewhere that has value, somewhere that returns things. This is why the INFJ's tolerance for choosing nothing over something fake grows as their relationship with their own interior deepens. Not because the need for real external connection diminishes, it does not, but because the alternative to artificial connection is no longer just emptiness. It is the INFJ's own company. And the INFJ who genuinely enjoys their own company, who finds the interior world genuinely nourishing rather than just familiar, is not sacrificing anything significant when they choose not to enter something hollow. They are choosing the real version of being with themselves over the fake version of being with someone else. And that choice, made from a place of genuine interior richness rather than resigned withdrawal, is not loneliness. It is one of the most honest forms of self-knowledge available to anyone. What the INFJ's refusal of artificial connection costs them, and why they pay it anyway. The INFJ's preference for nothing over something fake is not free. It carries real sustained costs that the INFJ pays over years and across multiple dimensions of their life. Understanding those costs clearly, not minimizing them, not framing them away as simply the price of depth, is part of the honest picture. The most obvious cost is social. The INFJ who consistently declines surface connections, who exits situations that are structurally shallow, even when those situations contain people who genuinely care about them, who holds the line on real versus fake at the expense of social belonging. That INFJ accumulates a social world that is small, sometimes very small. The circle of people they invest in fully is limited by the rarity of the real thing, and a small social circle, however high its quality, does not provide the ambient belonging that most humans need to feel embedded in a community of people who know them. The INFJ can feel deeply known by two people and still feel the absence of the broader relational texture that most people are surrounded by. The second cost is professional and practical. Most professional environments run on managed presentation, strategic networking, and relationships that are warm but structurally shallow. The INFJ who cannot operate easily within that structure, who disengages from connections they have assessed as artificial, even when those connections have professional utility, gives up advantages that most of their peers accumulate through relationships the INFJ could not sustain without significant personal cost. The third cost is time. Because the real thing is rare and because it takes time to find and to build, the INFJ spends more of their life between genuine connections than most people do. That time, however valuably spent in the interior, is time without the specific nourishment of genuine human contact. And that absence, accumulated across years, produces a specific kind of hunger that never fully goes away. The INFJ pays these costs anyway, not because they are unaware of them, not because they have concluded that the costs are small, but because the alternative, filling the time and the space and the social world with connections that will take more than they return, with relationships that simulate what they need without producing it, has been assessed through direct experience as the more costly option. They are not choosing the easy path, they are choosing the honest one. And for the INFJ, those two things have never been the same. What real connection actually looks like for the INFJ, and why it is worth everything the choice costs. This video has spent considerable time on what the INFJ refuses and why. This final point is about what they are refusing in the direction of. What the real thing actually looks like. Not as a fantasy, as a description of something that exists, and that the INFJ has experienced enough times to know is possible, however rare. Real connection for the INFJ is not the most intense connection. It is not the most dramatic or the most emotionally charged or the most all-consuming. The most intense connections the INFJ has had were often not the most real. They were often, as earlier videos in this channel have explored, connections organized around wound and need, rather than genuine mutual depth. Real connection is quieter than intense connection. It has a different texture, less urgency, more ease, a quality of arriving somewhere, rather than reaching constantly towards something just out of range. Real connection for the INFJ is a conversation where both people are actually present, not managing their presence, not half available, not performing engagement while remaining protected, both actually in the room, both willing to go where the conversation goes, rather than steering it towards safe territory, both capable of being surprised by what they find themselves saying, and staying with that surprise, rather than retreating from it. Real connection is a relationship where the INFJ does not need to edit, where the full version of the thought can be expressed without being compressed for the room, where the complete interior does not need to be translated into something more digestible before it is offered. Not because the other person understands everything perfectly. Real connection does not require perfect understanding. It requires genuine interest in the understanding. The effort, sustained over time, to keep reaching rather than accepting the approximate version. Real connection is being with someone and feeling, in the body, before any analytical assessment confirms it, that the interior is quiet, that the background vigilance has stopped, that something real is actually being exchanged, rather than the performance of something real. For the INFJ who has lived on both sides of this, who has spent years in artificial connection and has also tasted the real thing enough times to know precisely the difference, there is no version of this choice that does not return the same answer every time, without hesitation. Nothing over something fake every time. Because the real thing, when it finally arrives, is worth every moment of the nothing that preceded it, every single moment. 7 layers of one of the most honest and most costly preferences the INFJ carries. The preference for nothing over something fake is not stubbornness. It is not damage. It is not an inability to accept imperfection. It is a deeply considered, deeply experienced position about what connection actually is and what it requires, and the refusal to let the space where it belongs be permanently occupied by a simulation of it. You are not too demanding. You are not broken for knowing the difference. You are not wrong for choosing the empty space over the filled but hollow one. The real thing exists. You have felt it, and it is worth protecting the space for it. Brainy Quiet Mind. Subscribe. Share this with someone who has been told their standards are too high when the truth is their standards are just honest. One question for the comments. Have you ever stayed in an artificial connection longer than you should have? Not because you did not know what it was, but because the alternative felt like more than you could carry alone.